Well, as the stalemate continues in the Senate over the carbon tax repeal, the government's legislative agenda has stopped in its tracks, perhaps, following the debacle over lost votes in the 2013 West Australian Senate contest. The government moved to investigate how to reform the electoral system to make the polling process more simple and streamlined. Part of the ambit of an independent parliamentary committee into electoral reform was also the future of micro-parties and preference deals. But with crossbenchers proving vital to the government's agenda in the Senate, anything that might anger those micro-parties has perhaps been put on the back burner. Liberal MP Tony Smith is the chair of that particular committee, and he joins me now live from Parliament House. Thanks very much for your company. Have you and your committee's recommendations just been pushed to the side, courtesy of the desire of the government and Tony Abbott to try to get deals done with these micro-parties that wouldn't very much like the kind of electoral reform that your committee suggested?
Well, look, Peter, a couple of points. There was never an expectation that the recommendations that we made on the Friday before the budget would be converted into legislation for this session. I mean, obviously the priority is the appropriation bills and the budget bills.
So you're hopeful it's still going to be happening, it's just a matter of when, not if?
Look, there's no time sensitivity now, but we have to change the Senate voting system. I mean, the unanimous report that wasn't just Labor and Liberal, it was also the Greens and Senator Xenophon himself, strong views on this matter, is important to restore the will to the voter. I mean, we have a situation where that ballot paper in New South Wales, where you're sitting, had 110 boxes on it. It's the maximum printable width. They're handing out magnifying sheets. It's a farce. It has to end, and we have to make the last election where gaming of the system.
Are you confident that the executive arm of the government you're part of will share your view on that it's a debacle and that it has to be fixed?
Well, I am. Of course I am. I mean, the Special Minister of State, who's responsible for legislation in this area, highlighted this for us to inquire into. That's why we inquired into it. And there's a very thorough report there that's had views, as I said, from all of the parties. And the fact that it was a unanimous report means that it's durable. Our job, Peter, was to produce a very thorough report and do so as early as possible.
And you did exactly that, Mr. Smith, but by the same token, are you alive to the possibility, I suppose, that the attempts by both major parties, frankly, to court some of these micro-parties might put the ideas that you've got that were shared once upon a time, at least, by the executive arm of the government, might be put on the back burner?
Look, I am very confident that not only does the report have the strong support in the Liberal Party room, the Labor Party room, in the Greens, but also importantly, Peter, most importantly, amongst the Australian public.
I bet.
What we are seeking to do is restore the will of the voter so that you control your own preferences, you preference to the extent you wish, and you get clarity back into the system. Now, I fully appreciate that those who have succeeded in gaming the system by the vulnerabilities that are there won't want change. I mean, that's been obvious from day one. But from the voters' perspective, they desperately want change. And of course, I'm confident that at the appropriate time...
Let's name a few names, Tony Smith. Who's gamed the system? Ricky Muir?
Well, the micro-parties, the way it works, the micro-parties who have distorted the will of voters by their manner of preferencing.
So which ones?
Where
Ricky
a voter
Muir?
loses can... Well, I mean, I'm very happy to say that in the case of some of the micro-parties, and I've said so in the report, I've got nothing against Ricky Muir personally, but his election did not...
the system.
No, I mean, he popped out in a lottery, Peter. It could have been anyone. He didn't know it was going to be him, but the fact he got 0.51% of the primary vote, I'm not going to shy away from it. I said it in the report.
Well, what about his new advisor, though, Tony Smith? Sorry to interrupt, but what about his new advisor, Glenn Jury? I mean, you must have something against him personally. He's the one organising the gaming of the system.
I've got nothing against any of them personally. The system allowed this to occur. There's nothing at all illegal about it. It's just that voters naturally were bewildered when someone with 0.51% of the vote can be catapulted into the Australian Senate. And the only way that occurred was because voters are forced, if they vote above the line, to give their preference decision to party tickets. That's the only way it occurs. So, I mean, from my perspective, there's nothing personal, but reform obviously is a must. And the time sensitivity isn't now; it needs to happen obviously in good time before the next election, and enough time for the legislation and the education to occur.
I think you're right. I think the public are well and truly with you on this one. So let's hope that the executive arm of both the opposition and the government keep their nerve. One final question before I let you go. Your colleague in the Senate, James McGrath, did his maiden speech tonight. You wouldn't have heard it, I'm guessing. You would have been busy in the other chamber, perhaps.
No, I missed it. That's right.
Well, one thing he did do, take my word for it, is he argued for an increase of the GST. That's courageous, isn't it?
Well, senators and members in their first speeches should be allowed to espouse their views on all range of matters. He's obviously entitled to his view, and I heard from colleagues that he raised a number of very big policy issues. I'm looking forward to reading it, but he's a friend of mine, I can say this. It sounds to me like a senator's maiden speech, as distinct from a member of the House of Reps' maiden speech.
I won't ask you what you meant by that. I know exactly what you meant by it. Tony Smith, appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.